Hello and welcome to the Mystic Cast, where you join Jack Stafford and Deborah Littleboy, members of the Aetherius Society, the cosmic religion for the Aquarian age, as we break down the barriers between religion, science, metaphysics, philosophy, and mysticism, all of which are really only aspects of the self-same quest for truth. Please note, this is an independent program, not produced or fact-checked by the Aetherius Society. Today, our guest is Jacob Cooper. Hello, Jacob.
Hi, thank you for having me on. How are you doing?
We're doing great.
Yeah.
We're here with Deborah, my co-host.
Hi, where are you? Where are you, Jacob? Where in the world?
I ask myself that every day, but on the planet, my residence is currently in New York,
Right.
which some people roll their eyes after hearing that, but hopefully during this course of the interview, maybe you could see it. There still are some good folks in New York, and you have good hearts, and we mean well. Yeah.
Well, you have a wonderful story. That's what attracted us to you, and lots of parallels between our beliefs of our members, which we can get into in a bit later. But maybe you could just give us a short introduction, as I'm sure you get tired of telling this story, but you can do an autopilot. But maybe you could just give us a little introduction into your story.
September of 1993, I had, a virus called whooping cough, which for children, infants, and adults, could be quite detrimental and, in my case, fatal. If left untreated, unvaccinated. And so I had whooping cough at the age of just 3 years old. And at the time I didn't know it. And so I went to a playground with family, friends, and, just kind of like any other day, just climbed up into a ladder, going onto a slide. And I just began to just suffocate, climbing up the slide due to this cough. And it was the most traumatizing moment of my life. I don't want to sugarcoat that aspect, because I think with many NDEs, people focus on the mystical, euphoric sides of it, and they don't understand the double-edged phenomenon that it, can entail. So I was left totally breathless, not able to hold on to anything. It's kind of like you feel like you're drowning, you just want something to hold on to, and there was literally nothing for me to hold on to. So I was just put in this place of incubation of suffering that felt like an eternity, where I just wasn't able to breathe. And as a result, all parts of my body just began to shut down, because oxygen, keeps us, in our body, without
You're
it.
3 years old at this time, man.
Just 3 years old.
Oh.
Physically, we'll get into some of the, just the dichotomies, or just some of the differences of chronological age and soul age. But chronological age, I was 3 years old. And all parts of my body and brain just shut down. And the last thing that I felt within my body and my brain was my brain literally snapping in half, as if you are plugged into a wall and that plug is just yanked. And I felt a large crack within my brain. And as the euphemism says, my brain cracked open, and that's when God in the spirit realm came in. And that literally happened to me in a literal sense, not a euphemism, a metaphorical way. And once that, transition happened, I was able to get out of my own brain, and that's when everything opened, and I was connected to my guides, the spirit realm, angels, God. I was aware of past lives, what I would be doing in this life. And most importantly, I was, near-death experiencers are often told, hey, it's not your time, you have more stuff to do, or there's reasons for you to continue here, or they're given autonomy as to if they'll stay continuing, this life on this earth, or they'll continue their work on the other side. And I was shown a lot of different images and visualizations and premonitions of the work that I would do in this life. And I just was not able to turn that down. And from that decision, from that power of choice, is why I'm here physically, and that's the beauty of life, is decision. And we, each and every day of our life, we have the power to decide our reality, what we want to focus on. And you can take every freedom away, but you cannot take away the freedom of decision of our reality, what we want to focus on. And so that's the short synopsis of it. But certainly, within my 2 published books, I get into Life After Breath and The Wisdom Jacob's Ladder. I get into certainly a lot more detail, of it.
What was that like as for your parents, as, suddenly they have a 3-year-old trying to I have a 1-year-old and he can barely talk, but a 3-year-old can get words out. Like, how was that for your parents, for you at that time? Were you able to articulate that?
Well, near-death experience research will attest to the notion that it takes, several decades for any NDEer to really fully integrate and process their experience. But that's even more, increased with a child or an infant. And so for myself, there's two common themes that I have with near-death experiencers that I notice. It's either they'll shout off at the mountaintops that they had this experience and want to shake everyone and tell them, even children to a degree, or it's something so sacred to themselves that they just don't feel that the English language does justification for what their experience was. And that's the God honest truth to this day. It does not fully, you can't have words to describe the infinite. Language is finite. It's meaning, it's symbols. It doesn't fully encapsulate the full experience that you have, but it's the best tools that we have here. But I came up to my father shortly after my experience, and every day I am learning something new about my experience. The series of events don't change, but my, awareness of my parents' perceptions of what happened, increase, enhances. But my dad told me that I came up to him and I said something very powerful happened when I was rushed by the ambulance to the hospital. And I'm using my language now, my vernacular. I didn't say powerful at 3 years old, but something very powerful happened. One day it will make sense to you, but for right now it will not. And so I chose to just keep this very much buried deep inside of me for almost 2 decades. I didn't tell a soul.
So it wasn't suddenly you came back one day and you were like the golden child, a pearl of wisdom.
Right. Well, people think having near-death experience makes your life so simple and easy, and it was not. I mean, at least for me, I grew up in a home of 4 kids, and I was by far the most difficult child out of all of them, hands down. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that children could be a little bit like sheep, where you just have to kind of bow down to the cultural programming, and you have to have acceptance of yourself as a child. And all of a sudden, I recognized that I was not a child, but I was experiencing myself as one. And I remembered my eternal soul. And so that led to a lot of complexity and difficulty, having radical acceptance of myself as a kid. And I had a lot of defiance against that because the world was seeing myself as just the surface, the tip of the iceberg. And I knew that's not who I was in totality. They just saw my body and that was how they were speaking to me. And so it was just kind of torture where I had this underlying feeling inside, but I couldn't express it or articulate it, that this is not who I am, but you're talking to a body, but you're not talking to who I am,
Wow. Yeah. I mean, we learn from in the society, the higher self and the lower self, and that the differences, but it's hard to know who's talking at which time and just to fully appreciate the higher self. So, but maybe you tell us a bit more about, so when you did have this experience, what can you remember about it? Did it last a long time or short in your frame of reference?
The closest allegory I can have is, you ever watch C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles of Narnia? I know many viewers might be familiar with it. C.S. Lewis, wrote in kind of allegorical senses of Jesus within his works to a degree and had different references and characters. But that particular story, when they go into the wardrobe and they enter this world of Narnia that felt like an eternity, and they age there and everything like that, and all of a sudden they come back from that world and they're in the same clothes, as if time did not pass. That's pretty much what happened to me, where I felt like I was in this mystical world of eternity. And then all of a sudden I got back and the whole world was exactly the same, except I was radically different. And I think the way I could agree to it, relate to it, is almost like grief in a way. Like you lose someone so close to you, you're radically changed, and it felt like you're in an eternity of suffering, and yet the whole world is spinning the same way and nothing has changed. And so you've had a radical realization, but the world around you is the same. And that's kind of how I felt. So that was difficulty. But, for us, we're used to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the whole, measurements and just kind of dividing time. And it's, it's just funny in the spirit realm. It's like taking an ocean and trying to divide an ocean. I mean, or taking air and trying to divide air. I mean, you could technically try, but does not change the fact that on that reality, there is no time. That's a human construct. It's a construct here, but it doesn't change the ultimate reality that there is no time, which is something that our viewers, I'm sure, if they're coming from a perception of linear mind, will not understand. This takes a non-linear vantage point to understand.
So the term afterlife, how do you feel about that?
I don't know. I mean, I view, well, NDE was coined by a good friend of mine, Dr. Raymond Moody, in the 70s, who endorsed my first book. He's on the cover. But if you even ask him, he had probably like a different term, and he was more of the academic persuasion. I view it as eternal life experiences. That to me is what it is. You're not near death because there is no death. It's when you have NDEs, you recognize that death is a fiction. It may be true in this reality, but there is no real death, because the term death just means a complete ending, a complete stoppage, nothing past it. And when you have these experiences, you recognize how much of how false that is, that there is no ending.
I have to go to a funeral tomorrow, and everyone will be pretty upset. And so what's it like for you when you go to a funeral?
I think I still have the same, two things could be true at the same time. I mean, as a kid, after having this, I couldn't understand how someone would cry or get into hysteria when someone died. Because I said, why are you crying? They're fine. They're okay. They're enjoying it. I grieve people who are living while they're not living. They're not living while they're living. That to me is more of a death. I think life is a matter of choice and how deep you want to experience it. But two things could be true at the same time. You could have awareness of eternity, but you could also have the raw human reaction to it, and it's natural. So I'm not one to bypass grief. I think grief is, as a mental health worker, is vital, and the only way out is through. And it's not to ignore our feelings, our emotions. When there's great love, there's great feelings and sadness and agony. But on the other side of grief could be a newfound meaning, sense of purpose, and connectivity, to that loved one. So I think it's important to have a balanced perception. But there is a lot of research that points to the fact that having evidential awareness of the afterlife could be a great tool at a certain point to help with one's grief journey. That people who believe in or know that there's an afterlife tend to do better in their grief than those who do not. So, if anything else, if this is all false or whatever, it could at least help you with that box that you have about where that loved one is and your ability to find not only life after death, but to find life after their death more important. That's the important part.
So can I ask you about the technicalities about it? Because before from my own background, I came from more of a Buddhist background, that you die, you go, or a Christian even, you die and you go to a heaven and then a hell or a nirvana. And then I understood about reincarnation, you come back. So then you go there and come back, and it's the spirit world. And now through the terms of the teachings of the Aetherius Society, I understand there's different levels in that each chakra is a realm of consciousness, and you go to a higher vibration or a lower vibration. Does that chime with your own experience? Because when I see the term spirit world, it's kind of a bit all encompassing, and I kind of think of spirits, these bubbles floating around, whereas from the teachings, it's that on the other realms, there's fax machines, there's cars, there's printers, it's physical, there's another realm, just like this one, but at a different vibration.
I could only speak from my own experience that I was just in the pure light realm. I didn't experience hell.
You're one of the hot top people then.
Yeah, for myself, I go by the experiential reality, but also I could speak to what feels right and, rings true, is that I think hell is very much a human term, a human construct. It has the notion that God is unconditional and condemns. I think that's very much a human thing. At least for me, when I experienced God, it was eternal awareness and forgiveness and understanding. And it was a big energy of unconditional love. But the spark within ourselves is from that same source. So we are all divine sparks. And so I think really what kind of creator will kick down their own creations if they're struggling? And I think when people cause damage, it's often from a place of pain. I mean, hurt people will hurt people. So my hope is within time, there's ability for evolution of every spirit, and every part of the body to find healing, much like within the human body, there's certain parts that just are cancerous or aren't working. And I think on the, global, universal level, there's some souls who are, I think the closest understanding to hell to me is just a distance from essence and a separation.
That's a beautiful way to describe it. Yeah.
From that, because that to me is hell. I mean, it's a disalignment with one's true essence, and the pain of the world has overtaken your mind and your soul instead of your soul overtaking this world. Yeah,
I understand. There's also like in a city, you have the slums and you have the wall streets, and people go to some people want to go out at night to nightclubs, and some people like the fresh early mornings. So in the same people, you gravitate to people of different vibrations and different, and it's the same, I guess, in the spirit world, that you send a certain person to an angelic place with a cathedral, they'd be pretty bored, and then they need the certain experiences of what we would term darkness, but it's not punishment. It's just the realm of just desserts.
Yeah, well, I think everyone has their own bliss, and what they really connect to on a higher level. But to me, the afterlife is very much about this life. I think what we do in this life, not fully, but there's a part of what we do, what we like, what we're interested in, our passions, that could have, continuity. How I know this is, through years of, just doing my own research work and evidential mediumship. It's like, some of my loved ones, they'll come through undeniably with some of their passions and activities that they still continue to do, over there. So I think the things that we love to do in this life, we continue, and so it's like you want to have a great heaven, have an interesting life, because that's going to increase your eternity, develop interest, develop, meaning and experiences of this life, because that's going to make a more interesting story. And I think there's a quote by the Holocaust survivor, Elie Wiesel, that God made us because God loves stories. And we want an interesting story with depth and beauty and experiences and growth. And we're all just writing God's stories here with the lives that we live and what we experience. Could be at so many different levels of the pendulum of life, but we all have the ability, to transform and transcend, difficult moments of our life, to triumph and, in growth. But I think there's a degree of what we carry over in this lifetime, but also other lifetimes too. I think this isn't all that there is, and we're accumulation of not just this lifetime, but, all of our lifetimes. It just kind of adds up to one experience.
I want to bring in Deborah because she always has so many interesting observations.
Yeah, I can feel the wood burning over there. She's a lot going on.
That's a great way to describe it. She's got the fire. Right.
Yeah. I'm mute. I'm afraid I've got a lot of background noise today, so for that I apologize. Picking up on what you were saying, with what we were taught, by Dr. King, is that when he went into the higher states of consciousness and into samadhic trance, which is oneness with all, he said, come back was the most painful experience because he couldn't express it, but two, he didn't want to. There was something within him, it was too sacred to speak about. And so when you were saying that, you kept it, it was a sacred thing. And what did you do with that? And your coping strategy was to hold it within yourself, thinking about it for 2 decades or whatever. And then you come forward with the sense you'd made of that, however long it was that you weren't in this physical realm. And so for me, that similarity was fabulous. the other thing that you said about the life after life after life and the separation that we have from God is our hell is very much in line with what we're taught on karma and reincarnation. It is a case we're falling away so that we could see what it was like to come back. And so that experience is, if more people could understand that what they're bringing into their life is what they're bringing into their life, and they're not the victims of that, I think that the whole of the world energy would certainly have sort of would shift. Because you'd have this other viewpoint that like your worst enemy, if you want to, is your greatest teacher, because you want to have that experience, or you need that experience to balance things up. So yeah, listening to you is a joy.
Well,
Actually, well, thank you very much. And I tend to talk too much, so I'm going to back out and let Jack
no,
crack on.
those are great insights. I think the last piece that I wanted to deliver is how I was able to get out publicly with this, and when, how did that happen? It was really through reading another book on an ND encounter that was gifted to me by a family friend of mine. It was actually my godmother. And the book was by Betty Adie, who was, featured on the Oprah Winfrey Show, New York Times bestseller. And she wrote the book Embraced by the Light, which was a groundbreaking NDE encounter for its time. Now it's, everyone's talking about NDEs, but, in the 80s and 90s, before that, it wasn't as much of a household term. So reading Betty's story just gave a lot of universality, but more importantly, a label for it. And that works in conjunction with the work that I do in the mental health field, where I think to a degree, if you can name it, you could tame it. And I think once you're able to identify what you have, it becomes a commodity, becomes a thing, and it leads to more universality to it. And something that you could identify. The human part needs that. But also it gave me the confidence and courage to be able to talk about this. Other people not only had these things, because I thought I was the only one, but that, people are actually interested in this stuff. And so I was always wanting to speak about all kinds of things. I kind of wanted to be like a young, like Tony Robbins or Eckhart Tolle. And I was like reading all these books and stuff like that and thinking I was going to go on a podium talking about all these things, but recognizing, oh, geez, I had this thing in my own backyard and that's something to talk about. That's something that people will benefit from. And so that's true in life. Sometimes we walk 1,000 miles away from our own truth and we own what's in our own backyard. It's glorious for others to experience. We don't have to totally metamorphosize or change in order to really have people benefit from our light,
But you've trod your own path and you're in service to others as a healer, as a therapist. And do you see now the importance of why we forget our past lives in the spirit world? Because if we had to walk around in this
right
with a full memory of it, it would be hard to get through the day, no?
Yeah, I mean, we're here to have a human experience, right? So if you're able to have all that awareness at all times, you're over there more than here. So I think it's important that two things could be true at the same time, that you could be a spiritual being and still human as well too. And that's what we are temporarily in this life. We're not permanently human, but in this reality, you cannot deny that. And so how do you want to perceive that? Do you want to ignore, finances or food or your passions? That you can, you could have deprivation of all those things, or you could have a full-blown experience of those things, but not be enslaved by them, just doing it for the nourishment of your soul, not for addictive patterns or for the ego, but rather, the nourishment of your soul.
Yeah, then you approach everything, oh, this is my lesson for today. Oh, I got to do my taxes. So interesting. And you get the experience that you need to learn, the lesson put in front of you. And yeah, it makes life takes the stress away.
Yeah, well, what I try to do is within my clients and myself is to make life your kind of ashram or your monastery, where everything becomes a sacred and holy act and everything could have mindfulness and presence, even the most difficult, mundane things. And that way you get the power back. You don't get drawn out by these things. You're able to have a sense of being in whatever you're doing.
Mm.
So I think our soul wants to experience and express itself to whatever it is. And, if you could have it through the most mundane things, if it's having like a positive attitude towards it or being present with it and just the experiencer of it, it's a whole different ballgame. So I think most of reality has to do with the vantage point that we experience it as, and the foundation of what we're looking at life. Is it through the wise mind or the victim mind? Where's our foundation? Where's our basis through the experience of life? And that to me is gravitation towards the God lens versus being pulled away from that, where you're looking at things through essence and beauty and seeing past the surface. When you're connected, the whole world around you really shifts and changes in great degrees.
Yeah. Deborah mentioned the love energy, which is something we talk about, love being a physical thing. That's part of the teachings of the Aetherius Society.
Yeah.
Love is the universal answer. Isn't that right, Deborah?
Because whatever we have towards another, we feel ourselves, right? You judge another, you judge yourself. You hate another, you feel hatred yourself. But you love someone else, you feel love yourself. And that's what oneness is. Oneness is not just us, one day holding hands and kumbaya. Oneness is the eternal reality of life itself. And it's finding ways for us to get past some of the surface differences and factors. Oneness does not mean sameness. And I think if people are able to look past the surface, they could see the one phyla that we're all connected to. Now, it doesn't mean to not have boundaries or stuff like that. You got to, protect yourself, sure, because some people would rather cause more ill will, than healing. And for them, that's a comfort zone. That's the devil that they know, in a way. So I think surround yourself with those that really believe in you, uplift you, and that you feel inspired by, versus those that just want to bring you down. Just having boundaries for yourself is important too.
Can I just come in on this subject of love? Because love is one of the biggest things in the teachings the biggest thing in the teachings that affected me. We're taught that love is an energy. It is not an emotion. And so therefore, when people say that if I love you, I love this, I love that, it's something that they like very much. It's driven by the emotion of it. And so it can easily turn on its head if suddenly the subject of the love does something that isn't lovable,
right.
then love changes. And we're told that isn't love at all. We're told that at the very lowest octave,
right,
the opposite of love is hate. And so if you like, at the very, very lowest, that's the energy of love. But there are several octaves of it. And when you channel, the more pure that you channel it, it's actually a universal energy.
right.
And so we in the society we're taught to use this robot, which is our body, to bring in the universal life force and send it out through the palms of our hands and our heart chakra. It's a physical thing. It's not some sort of wishy-washy thing. You feel it. People feel it differently. I feel it like a tingling in my hands, but I feel it. It's going out. My heart expands and I feel it going out. And so my mind then directs that energy to wherever so point A being Deborah, point B being Jacob. I send you love energy. That balances you. And the purer I can bring it down, the more you will be able to absorb it, or the more you can open to it.
You can love someone without actually liking them.
Wow.
So that for me was like one of the biggest things. So when you were speaking about we're all love, is that something that you resonate with, that it can be an impersonal thing? So you can send love to a situation that you actually dislike intensely?
Right. Well, I think if you chip away, we all are from that same source. So, it's I think on the human level, that's something we could certainly experience. But when you're connected to the soul, you connect to that oneness. So in the human part, there's unconditional liking or loving, but on the soul, when you connect to love of the soul on the soul level, that is completely unconditional, so it takes away the ego and the expectations and the judgments. So, and I think it's more so love on the soul level, but I think the Greeks were onto something when they discussed the different levels that love has. I mean, it's one word, but there's so many different levels. And I think we have to get into just differentiation of conditional versus unconditional. There are parts of my life when I, years later had an out-of-body experience that I speak of in my book. I just, for years, I was like hearing about we are one, all this stuff. But then once you have direct experience of something, it's a whole different ballgame than just the information. And I had a direct awareness of this one strand of energy that we all are connected to, but not everyone is tuned into. You could think that you're not something, but it doesn't change the reality. So most people are just blocked in over here in their own egos and their own personalities and focusing on the me, and they're not connected to the feeling and the oneness. They're very much in separation. And so when you say what's hell, closest thing to hell is separation. The closest thing to unity is connectivity. Heaven to me is connectivity to all of life itself and the eternal life itself without separation.
Well, the one energy, that's shiver went up my spine when you said that. Yeah, because just before we came on, Deborah had found a transmission that Dr. King brought through from a master's from Saturn. And very interesting related to that.
And I think for people just to experience and play with it, like try to focus just on yourself, and then you'll find things to pick apart and judge through your own filter. And then try to say, get out of yourself and try to focus on something, a beautiful thing in someone, even though you don't like them. Try to see the essence and try to kind of play with the lens that you're looking at life. And as Wayne Dyer says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. And I think it's important for us to play with just different ways of looking at life. And this planet could feel like a whole different, just terrain if we were able to do that.
And how do your patients generally react to you when you're showing the knowing of the oneness to them? I mean, obviously everybody's different, but how would you, when you've actually tuned in and you're looking at somebody that actually is on the surface really quite bent out of shape, and you're looking for the divine essence, which is there. Is there a connection point where they sort of get it? I guess I'm talking about trust building.
Right. Well, I mean, there was a part of me for a period of time that just wanted to live, in a monastery, right? I just wanted to be a Buddhist monk for a period of time. And I think being a therapist in a way has trickles of being a monk if you do it the right way. By that, you're acting in mindfulness, you're actively listening, you're in non-judgment, you're looking up at things and not down at things. You're trying to understand, which takes yourself under someone and looks up at their world. So, it's a very kind of holy act. I don't get too involved in the just kind of clinical aspect of it because that takes away the spirituality of it. I'm more in therapy. What's infiltrated itself is a lot of Eastern philosophical ideologies, which has been great. Mindfulness is very much accepted, and that's infiltrated itself into a practice called, dialectical behavioral therapy, which, works, with a lot of different personality disorders, mood dysregulation, cognitive behavioral therapy, again, change your thoughts, change your reality. So a lot of principles from Eastern philosophies and Alcoholics Anonymous has, infiltrated itself into therapy today. But for myself, it's about the energy. It's not so much what I say, but the energy that I embody, because person A and person B could say the same exact things, but if there's incongruency with that person's words or the energy isn't right, they're not going to latch onto it. But if person B has congruency with the words that they say or just the energy that they have, people, are intuitive and they gravitate to energy, not so much information,
Brilliant. Thank you.
That's something you've said twice in the interview, that the separation is suffering. And that's something I should really take into the silence, because we have the masters have said, ignorance is the only crime. And if it's ignorance of leads to suffering, but it's ignorance of the divine, because if everything is
Right.
the divine aspect of God, then you should be living in bliss.
Right. Well, not only does separation it means suffering, but separation causes suffering too in humanity. You wouldn't kill 10 million people in the Holocaust if you understood that each person wasn't outside yourself, but was yourself, right? That would be self-sabotage and self-harm. So I think if people recognize that others are not outside of them, but a part of themselves, how could you ever hurt a thing? So it gets tricky with, eating certain foods and stuff like that. It's a whole other can of worms and stuff like that. But really, you wouldn't intend to have pain. You would bless all things. You wouldn't cause or like pain, because that is basically, hurting yourself. You would recognize,
Some people do that though, self-harm.
Some
I'm sure
people
you've
are
had some of your patients.
and I deal with that all day. It's with certain personality disorders, particularly borderline personality disorders, are more susceptibility for self-harm behavior because it's cathartic to them to a degree. They have so much pain, they have no idea what to do with it. So for them, that's their outlet. So as a therapist, we try to work on sublimation, which is taking that intention towards a healthy outlet instead of inflicting pain on yourself, and finding healthy coping strategies and coping skills that are not harmful,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
so
learning
that's
how to deal with that emotional
Yeah.
intensity when it comes up. Yeah.
Yeah, you just have to say the same thing to different people in different ways. There's only this one
Yeah.
truth. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the love energy is the same. And that's your identifier for it. When you're, as you say, opening yourself to the oneness and looking at them from raising them. So you're actually raising them as opposed to looking down. I think that is a really nice way of, well, not nice, it's a great way of describing how to lift people up,
Right.
how to affirm them as being a soul being. That's
Right. Yeah. And, not all people, some people, personality disorders will take advantage of this and use this against you. But I've noticed when someone is very distressed and you are just an energy of a calming balm to them, they all of a sudden change and shift from being in your presence.
Mm-hmm.
So I find just kind of like witnessing that when someone comes through all this distressing stuff and my energy is connected, they feel that and there's a healing that takes place. And so what we resist persists, but if people are be able to open themselves to other, states of energy and consciousness, amazing things could really occur, and they'll say, geez, what happened? What was that? And they'll start to explore it and get them on a journey that life does not have to be just this way, that I could have different channels of my existence to really connect to.
You must feel responsibility. You have to keep yourself in shape. You look
Yeah.
good. You're
Yeah.
not clean shaven. You're
I run
awesome.
almost every day. I
Yeah.
try to
got a
meditate,
glow.
yoga.
Yeah.
The last couple of days I've been on vacation, so I'm a little bit bloated and out of shape right now, but I'll get back into it.
You look in great shape. I mean, look at us. No, that's a responsibility. Yeah, it's
Yeah. I think what's ignored in the New Age community or spiritual community is how important self-care is. People will ignore all these things that can have so much enhancement on your path, exercise, diet, just going out and moving. All these things could really accelerate your energy, your vibration, your vitality, and so I've noticed a little bit more some of the New Age teachers, like I think I've seen Eckhart Tolle like riding on a bike a little bit, and Deepak doing his thing, and Dalai Lama I've seen, working out too. So I couldn't stress enough from just a spiritual mental health perspective how vital it is, self-care, just these simple steps that we could do that could really just enhance our lives. Because if you think about it, yes, we're spiritual, but we're also bio-neurochemical in this body. And if you're doing proven steps to proper brain health and physical health, your life is going to transform. You're taking care of your temples. So I'm a big proponent of brain health and body health, too.
We do a lot of prayer and mantra and pranayama and,
But also, can I just step in, Jack? There's a fabulous lecture where Dr. King says that aerobic exercise is vital. And in fact, he made it a condition for his staff members to actually do physical exercise. Now, bearing in mind, we're going back, this is like the 50s. So it's a different thing. And he had an army fitness guru that he'd taken on board to give some ideas on the physiology of how to keep fit within so many minutes, or, so that you could keep his staff and personnel up to speed, in their physical body as well as all their other bodies. And I remember reading this lecture. Now, I'm in my mid-60s and I was fit once, but never no more. Yeah. And so I listened to this whole lecture and I'm thinking, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. And then I got the get out clause. He said that ladies over the age of 29, though I definitely qualified, shouldn't go at things too tough because their body wouldn't cope with it as well. Now, that's my get, if you like, how you can twist things just to suit your own. I didn't really kid myself, but I must have listened to that lecture 7 years ago now. And every time I go out to exercise, something insists, I know you're a lot more than 29 years old, Deborah. You're more than double that. You must take it easy. So this is self-sabotage and kiddery that certainly goes in with me. And by you saying that, it's just, if you like, giving me another little prick in the arm that I need to exercise my heart. If I want to do best work in this world, to look after the physical body a bit more than I do. So thank you.
Everyone, it's important how you see yourself. I mean, I used to be incredibly overweight as a kid, and I saw myself as that. But once I just tried to play with it or try to wear a different hat and start to see myself, I'm an athlete, I'm fit, I'm that. And from that identity, and you look great, but but from that identity, I was able to really play that role. I think everyone has an inner athlete in them and their own level of that and their own ability to stretch that, and whatever your level is, just kind of know your bounds. But I think everyone has an inner athlete and life is a marathon. So, you want to go at your own pace. You don't want to, people ask me, why don't you run marathons? You're a runner. And I say, I don't want to abuse my body just for, if it's for a cause, maybe, but, you want to stretch yourself a little bit, but not to where you're not going to be able to move again. You want to have a body for a long haul. So I like what Mr. Rogers did. Mr. Rogers was an avid swimmer, right? He would do almost 72 laps a day, which was a mile. And swimming is one of the greatest exercises for longevity and has the least wear and tear on your body. And it's just great to be in that water energy. So, but again, just kind of knowing your engine and just kind of knowing, what could I have that kind of fitness in my life? What could I do at any level? Even if you're wheelchair bound, you could still do some breathing exercises, maybe some tapping, stretching your arms a little bit, so I think everyone, for the most part, can have some degree of movement that they can incorporate intentionally.
We've gone off love now. We're talking about loving thyself. It's all still one subject. It's one energy. So we have so much of it, and we should, we want to go. We're in for the long haul. So these are our robots' bodies. We have to keep them in shape.
Yeah.
So we're almost to the end here, but it's been such a fascinating conversation, and maybe we just circle back to the original focus of the conversation about the afterlife and and the transformative encounters that you've had. Is there something you want to leave people with, or
Sure. Well, my hope is people enjoyed our conversation today. I mean, my second book is The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder, and I had that because biblical Jacob had not a near-death experience, but a near-death experience because his brother Esau was kind of chasing him after getting the covenant from his father Isaac, and he was trying to hurt him or kill him. But he had a dream with death kind of facing him in the face and seeing angels going up and down the ladder. And so for me, that was the play on words that I had, where I was just a little boy on a ladder and I had this near-death experience. So God works in a very humorous and symbolic kind of way. There's a lot of synchronicities if you sit closely enough. But my near-death experience occurred in a playground, and out of all things. And I was just a child. When people say, you're a child, how could you remember this? And I could say I'm a child, and I remember that we're all children in God's playgrounds. We're all our brothers and sisters' keeper. And I had this near-death experience, in this eternal kingdom of God's playground, and the reminder that we're all just playing in God's playground. We have to remind ourselves that. And there's a one-way ticket, back there. For me, I had a little stopover from my near-death experience, but this life is not forever. We go back from where we came, but the key is to remember who you are. I think you become who you are by remembering who you are. When you remember who you are, you can really morph into it. And remembering is your core essence, your core truth as this expansive, eternal, magnificent being. But somewhere down the line, we've told we're not good enough. We're not this, we're not that. So that gets confused with the ultimate reality. Sometimes, we have to understand that someone did not make us, but they try to break us. Does not make sense, right? So if they didn't make you, how could they break you? God was the one who made us. So
I need to write down some of these quotes you're coming up with. These are great. You really, you should have printed them on coffee mugs or t-shirts, because get the books as well, but you need a merch. I think you need a merch item. That's great. Yeah. Some of these quotes, put them out, highlight them. Yeah.
Hashtag. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but you've obviously, do you ever remember karmically why you had to have this experience as a 3-year-old? Did you get any insights into that?
I don't know exactly, but just for me, it made sense because I had in my last lifetime, I don't use the word commit when it comes to suicide because that criminalizes mental health. You don't commit a heart attack, you don't commit brain, cancer, you don't commit something physically. So I don't look at mental health any differently. Than that. And suicide is not just mental health. Some people have physical conditions or traumas, and it's not all just that. So I completed suicide in my last lifetime. And I just remembered in that last lifetime, my back was against the wall. There was no hope. And I just was not able to let go of pain. In my near-death experience, I was in a similar sensation, a similar situation when I was suffocated. And from letting go of my own just suffocation, I was able to surrender to the breath of eternity. And within this life, in this world, we're taught that surrender is giving up, but surrender is really giving into our infinite power. It's not a weakness. It's giving into our ultimate power. So the power of letting go is so vital because, we become a lot weaker when we just hold on to everything. Our strength really lies in our ability to be untethered and unencumbered, the ability to let go to a greater force within all of us. And that saved my life. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I'm going to have to listen back to this interview because you've had so many interesting insights, and thank you so much. Well, how can people get hold of you, get your book?
Well, it's not like where is Waldo? We're trying to find Waldo and you're looking for that. I'm able to be found. It's jacobalcooper.com is my website, and people could contact me for services or potential events, speaking engagements, book signings. Going to be presenting at the Edgar Cayce Association of Research and Enlightenment, not this weekend, but next weekend in Virginia Beach. So familiar with Edgar Cayce, he was, international, medical intuitive and really groundbreaking for the early 1900s and stuff like that. And so it's my second time going back there. So I like to do different events and hopefully more international stuff because I'm kind of getting bored of the US and I want to venture out to meet other people and different backgrounds. That's what it's about. I mean, I love living in New York for that reason. It's a melting pot of all cultures. Where I live, it's not as much, but you go towards the city, it's just a mixture of that. And that's how life should be. You should be interested and curious with others' stories and backgrounds, not just holding on to your own stuff and everyone else is othered, So.
Wonderful. Well, did I forget anything, Deborah?
Say that again?
Okay. No, it was for me. You probably did, Jack, but I've just been too mesmerized with listening to Jacob, so I don't know. I think that you've done a perfect job, both of you.
Oh, thank you.
You've done very well.
I want to be very
Nice to get
clear
it.
though that it's spirit who comes through me. I'm just a guy in an orange t-shirt. That's spirit. That's and that's what people need to remember. Is sometimes we put people on pedestals with big social media followings or bestsellers, and spirit is one that's doing this work. We're just the messengers. Don't thank me, thank spirit. I'm just a dude.
That's a beautiful note. That's a beautiful note to end on. And if people are interested in the Aetherius Society, they can also go to the website. All links are in the show notes. So thanks again, Jacob.
This is a wonderful dialogue. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Jack. And thank you for the good work you're doing. The world needs love. It really does. Yeah, it really needs awareness. We need love, and you're doing the good work. Thank you.
Amen. Goodbye.
Bye now.